Alright, hang on. It's a bit, I'm at home at the moment, I'm not in my office, so it's a bit, I'm a bit backlit there, aren't I? Hang on, let me turn that off. It might be too, yeah, it kind of works, doesn't it? Right, we've got a minute or so, so I'm just going to lurk. I'm going to get a bit caffeinated. My girlfriend said to me, she said, Steve, you're always like having a drink or something on your YouTube live, and that's because my throat goes. So I've just realised I'm doing it again. I've got this real habit of having some sort of liquid before I start, and then realising it makes the sound. Hang on, let me take that off. How you doing? Hey, good, thanks. Hey, Max. Hey, John. Right. I just fell asleep because I woke up at 4:30, which that wasn't on purpose, and didn't go back to sleep. Hey, Alec, how you doing? So, yeah, so I'm just kind of, I've woke up about 20 minutes ago. I had a day yesterday of reading magic books and practicing. Hi from Toronto. Hi, Colin. Oh, I missed one there. I know someone said, why are you up? I did have a sleep, Pete. Like it was, yeah, 4:30, got up, just couldn't get back to sleep. I get this thing at the moment. I wake up, I'm doing lots of different things. I talked about this in my podcast this morning called Roll Overwhelm. And when you're trying to do loads of different things, it can stress you out a little bit. And it's not like you feel stressed, but just things build up. So this morning I sort of woke up at 4:30, and then I was just about to fall asleep. And then my son woke me up at 5. He never gets up. And he's like, can I go downstairs? And I was like, no, it's 5 o'clock. And then he couldn't sleep. Anyway, it's just ramble before we start. So if I start sort of properly going for it, let me know, because I've just done a double espresso from kind of asleep to double espresso in 10, 20 minutes, which may be not a good idea. And like I said, we're at my house, we're on my Wi-Fi, which seems a bit iffy at the moment, so I apologise in advance if we go. The quality isn't going to be that great. Just a couple of things on the channel. I have invested, I borrowed a camera to film with. I've got a little camera. And I borrowed it and gave it back recently and decided to invest in a new camera. It's a very nice camera. So the channels should start looking a little bit different. I'm going to start putting more on it. The problem I've had with filming, just to geek out a minute, is I'm filming myself. Obviously this is on my phone, but with my camera for the reviews, it can be hard to put like more magic stuff on there and make it look decent. I did a little bit with the book review I did recently of Tesseract, but I'm going to start putting more magic stuff on. So if you want any, I'm not going to expose that much, but if you want any kind of tutorials-ish on certain things you might be working at, there might be a way of doing it. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, but keep an eye out and feedback. The point is that if things change and you want to give me some feedback, either way, it's always really appreciated. Right, so what I'm going to do now, I've got a couple of questions from the channel that I'm going to answer. And then, I was going to say I'll be brief, but I probably won't. How you doing, Anthony? Anthony, I think. And then we'll get on with it. So if I don't... have you read the Eugene... I'm terrible at this, aren't I? I get a question, then I stop. No, the Eugene Burger book, I really want it. I'm currently halfway through Pure Imagination, and I'm going to review that. I tried so hard not to get the cards out and just read it, and I've learned everything in it, the first half. Which is good, because it means I've got a feel for some of the tricks. So I'm going to review that, and then I've got, what's it called? Hang on. Oh, the Codex, Phil Smith's book to review, which is like 1,000,000 pages long. That's going to take me about a year. But I do want to do the Eugene Burger book. So, but I can't afford to keep buying them to review because of the camera I've just bought. Basically, I've spent every single penny of my money on. Without a lens, I've got a camera arriving. Literally every single bit in my account has gone on the camera, and I can't afford the lens, which is £1,300. Oh, it's actually 1,800 unless you get it from Switzerland. But so I'm not buying anything. Steve, we have the Shift book from Ben O. It's one that you'll be reviewing. I asked them if they wanted me to review it, and they sort of said, "Oh, we're thinking about what to do with how we're reviewing stuff." I will ask them again. Same deal, really. I want to review all this stuff, but I've got a bit of a backlog, so I can't really be sort of buying them. Want Codex, but yeah, not before Christmas. Same, yeah, there's loads of ones. There's a lot of question I got on the the channel was about books I haven't got that I want, and I don't think I'll get there today, but we will. So if I ignore you now, I'm not ignoring you, basically, but I want to do these questions, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A. I'm trying to find, if you've got a question and I ignore it, put it on the comments afterwards, because I have to play back this in real time if I want to see the questions. So if you've got a genuine question and I don't get to it in the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, do put it on the comments afterwards, and I'll add it to all the questions, and we will get to them one day, because I'm getting a lot of people ask similar questions, so I'm trying to sort of clump them up. But this is on practice, okay? How many hours a week do you practice? Tips on the Faro Shuffle. Alan Rogers. Now, right, first of all, the Faro Shuffle. I've got I do a Faro. I don't perform a Faro because I've never done that thing of sitting with a Faro Shuffle for hours, and well, I have done it for hours, but I don't feel comfortable performing it with a trick that's totally reliant on it at the moment. Every now and then under pressure, I just falter and then start panicking and it goes. So, and if the cards are quite dodgy. So tips on the Faro Shuffle. I've talked to so many people about the Faro people, and people that I know that do it flawlessly just say it's just time. You've just got to spend so much time with it and you'll get it. And decent cards, weirdly enough. And I know bad workman always blames his tools, but apparently if you do have slightly ropey cards, they'll Faro a few times and then start getting a bit iffy. Someone did tell me a story once. It was, who was it? JJ, I think. Chris Power's friend. He used to go out to Portugal and do these gigs in Portugal. And JJ worked with Lewis de Matos, and JJ said to me that a friend of him said the best Faro shufflers he ever met were these people whose job it was to sort out Sven decks. So they weren't magicians, they were people who were paid to, when Svengali decks arrived, to Faro them together. If you know Svengali deck, short and long, the short bits, Faro them in rather than sort them all out. And people had to do that hundreds of times. So apparently they could just Faro and just make the Sven decks basically, so Faro in the short into the long. So there you go. There's a little anecdote that I've dredged up from my memory that I haven't thought about for years. But how many hours a week do you practice? This is a really interesting one. So and now I'm going to a bit of a plug, and I think, and I did plug this on the review. I just put Andy's Focusing on Magic review out, and I did plug my course. All the Faro does is, yeah, it does make people a bit suspicious to Faro, but I think if you're really good at it, it doesn't. I think some tricks are incredible with a Faro. But anyway, where was I? Practicing. I'm not going to look. I'm not going to look at the comments. So, I plugged my How to Practice course on my Card Magic course a little bit on Andy's review that I put out today on Focusing on Magic, and I had to cut it because it didn't quite fit with the review and it felt a bit wrong. But I will plug it now. I've got a course called How to Practice on my Card Magic course. You get it with it, or you can buy it separately. You might as well get it with it. But the point is that there is no hard and fast rule with it. The issue we sometimes have with practice, if we think we can't do 5, 6, 7 hours a day, then we don't bother. Some of us are a bit all or nothing, and that's a really big mistake, because those little bits of practice really, really mount up. I've talked about this before. I'll talk about it again. I have learned really, really difficult moves by just doing a little bit every day on a bus. I learned the clip shift like that. I used to street perform in York, and I used to get the bus and from the station. I used to sit there for ages. I learned the clip shift like that. Yeah, of course I had some ability first, but just the best thing you can learn with a deck of cards is for them just to feel part of you. And that sounds a bit woo-woo, doesn't it? But you know that feeling you get when you just learn something, then all of a sudden you get to that unconscious competence when you can just pick them up, and even shuffling and stuff, they just feel like they're just there. And I've got cards in my hands all the time, much to the annoyance of many people in my life. But they just feel like they're just, like, if I haven't got them in my hands for a certain amount of time, I just want them. So to get to that point takes time and repetition. And I think, yes, if you can, and you have the kind of situation where you can do a certain amount of time every day, it's a really useful thing to do. If you can't, don't think that is like, oh, there's no point, because you can become incredibly good by just, using those moments. So watching TV and stuff, and I don't mean watching movies, because that could be quite annoying to some people, but if you're watching something that's a little bit brainless, have the cards in your hand, try and do something quiet that isn't quite as shuffly. Yeah, practice your waterfall shuffles and stuff. Hi Josh. So When I got into card magic, I made a decision. I was kind of around the edges of it, and I was all right. You know, I could do a couple of little things, and I wanted to get good. So I worked through card college, and I dedicated about 5 hours a day to card magic. And I thought, no, I'm going to do this for the job. And the reason, and I got that. And I couldn't do it every single day, but when I could, and don't get me wrong, I was a street performer, so it was very easy for me to do. You know, street performers work 45 minutes a day, if we're lucky. So I did the 5 hours a day. Now that came from when I was a juggler. I met a guy in Exeter. This is before the performer, way before any of that. I was learning to juggle, and I got fairly half decent at juggling. And I met a guy in Exeter. I lived in Sidmouth in Devon, so small town, small city. And John and Ben, who were dear, lovely people, who wasn't for them, I wouldn't be sitting here now, used to practice about 5 hours a day and treat it as a job in a fives court, a bit like a squash court, a disused court. And they used to hire it and go in there, and they said, do you want to join us? And that's where I got that mentality of thinking, right, if I want to do this as a job, I mean, be world class at something, hi Alan, then I need to treat it seriously. Now that's because I wanted to be a professional, world-class magician, and that it sounds like a massive thing to say. And world-class just means top 5%. So that means basically being above average, really. World-class doesn't mean you have to be the top 5 in the world. It means you're not just a jobbing sort of I can do a few things. Now there is nothing at all wrong with that. That just wasn't my decision at the time. Now part of that was because I was a street performer and I had my eye on maybe one day I'm not going to want to street perform. I didn't want to be a juggler when I was 50 years old. And I remember saying 15 years ago that I don't want to be doing that. I think there's an elegance to card magic that you can do when you're 70, 80 and still looks good. Whereas some of the stuff I was doing at the time as a street performer I could imagine it looking a bit sad at the age of 50, 55. The stuff I was doing, not street performing, but I was doing a straight jacket chain, was very physical, and what happens when I can't be quite so physical. All that stuff was going around in my head. So it's a long way of answering the question, but the question was how long do you practice each day? Some people are options people, some people are procedures people. Some people like to follow a procedure, they're motivated by it. If you're one of those people, I suggest making a rule that is realistic, but pushes you a little bit. So if you find it really easy to do 20 minutes a day, maybe push it to half an hour a day. It's better to do that daily practice than it is to do hours in one go and then nothing for 3 weeks. You know, your body doesn't work like that. Those neural pathways you're building up in your brain will be built up by repetition. So the question is, you know, if you look at the Malcolm Gladwell thing of we need 10,000 hours practice to be world class, you can actually have a lot less than that. And as I said in the review of Andy's book, if you read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Chef, it's a great resource for looking at what we really need to do to practice. So the answer, long-winded answer to Alan's question, how many hours a week do you practice? Right, me, if I add it up, oh man, I don't know, a couple hours a day, probably, with the cards, but then maybe some days I don't do any. But if I'm working on something, that's a different thing. I'm just going to see have we got a, is this just my screen? That's really, sorry, if there's, I think there's a bit of a thing on the screen, but can't get it off, got to get a new phone. So I hope that helps, but check out the How to Practice course on StevieFaulknersCardMagicCourse.com. Right, that wasn't my answer to the question, I'm working up. The next question by Martin Pescatore, I think that's how you pronounce it. How do you create an engaging presentation for your effects, or do you just let the magic speak for itself? Wow, that's a huge question, and it very much depends on the individual. I really am not the person that thinks every magic trick needs some elaborate presentation. Some people say it does, it needs a story. It really doesn't. You know, Dynamo, people like that. And say what you like about Dynamo, and a lot of people are like, oh, he's not a performer. He is a performer. That he has a distinct style, and it's very clever. To see someone all the time on telly, they've got to have a kind of likability is more important, I think, than being hilarious or funny. You know, if you're really funny and you're highly energetic, that could grate after a while on TV. Someone like Dynamo, and Darren Brown does this as well, is just very likable. Excuse me. And you can watch likable people for hours and hours and hours. Sorry, there's a coffee ripping on me. So the engaging presentation part of it isn't necessarily on writing a presentation. It's about getting rapport with your audience, and that's about understanding what your audience want. Now, I talk about this in great depth, and we haven't really got time to go into it in detail here, but part of presenting magic for me is more about rapport than it is presentation. Yes, I'll have little hooks and I'll have some little stories around what I do. I do a coin routine, and I base it around the cheesy story of the first thing the magician sees when he's a kid is a coin out the ear. But I actually say, you know, it's what a lot of magicians say because it's true, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but it's got, and I sort of start that on that. Now that has a very, but I've improvised around that, and I haven't written a script. And this is just me, by the way. The presentation comes from the people seeing your humanity, I think. People seeing your authenticity, and people seeing you as a human being that is a bit like them. And that's what people will watch. Now, you can do that through a story and not be like them. So you can do, say, bizarre magic and do a really spooky story, and as long as they can relate to it. So it has to touch them emotionally in some way. I'll share something very quickly with you, but if you are the sort of person that wants to write a presentation, because this is something I teach presentation classes, and I'll do a longer video on this one day if you want, and share it in detail with the flip chart and stuff. But very briefly, if you want to write a presentation of magic, why, what, how, so what, all right? So imagine a grid in front of you, why, the what, the how, the so what. The why, and this comes from Bernice McCarthy's format, it's called. It's an understanding that people prefer to learn in different ways. It's not necessarily a learning style, we do them all, but some people are why learners. They want to learn by having an emotional connection with something, and they can't really learn until they've got that. I'm really simplifying all that. So some people are what learners, which mean, pulling your nose off your face trick. What learners are people that just want the facts, they want the data, they just want it, there it is, fair enough. People who are how learners are people who like to get involved with something and don't want to just watch it, they want to kind of feel it. And so what learners are people that want to take it into the real world. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because this is also the way we learn. Okay, we do the why, we get emotionally connected with something, we do the what, we see something, we think about it, we abstract from it, we take ourselves away from it and start kind of analysing it logically. We then play with it and practice it. We then adapt it to our real lives and take it out into the real world. So when you're doing a presentation, if you really want something with a beginning, a middle and an end, start with the why, start with getting an emotional hook. It could be a story. Stories are a brilliant way to do it. And I don't mean something elaborate. It could be very, very brief. It could be, I was going down the road the other day. It doesn't have to be something really amazing, just to hook them in. It could be that you're just making them laugh. That's another emotion you could be getting out of them. It could be that you're just making them like you, you're engaged with them, you're creating rapport. That's the first bit. Second bit is the what. That's just a trick. Okay, that's just the nuts and bolts of it. The how is maybe getting them involved somewhere that if they put their hand out, or they, you know, the involvement of the audience. And it's called the how. It doesn't really make sense to language, but that means they've got to get involved in some way to feel part of it. And then the so what is the end bit. That's the what they leave that experience with. Okay, so the trick's finished and they walk away. What do you want them walking away with when they talk about it in the future? That probably won't make sense. Watch it back. But if you want me to do a more detailed, because I can go into all the different aspects of that. But it works brilliantly for presentations. It even works for articles and blogs and things like that. But look it up, the format by Bernice McCarthy. So that's presentations. But what I would say is it's very important also, if you're a magician and you're just starting out, or you haven't done that much work as a magician, or you don't want to, but you just want to do it as a hobbyist, but you want to be able to appeal to different people, the biggest tip I can give you is to match your audience. A match doesn't mean copy, and this is something else I teach with training. It's not about copying everything they do, but match their demeanor, adapt and be flexible. So many magicians are not flexible. They have a demeanor and that's who they are. If you're going up to a table of 20-year-olds that are getting hammered at a wedding, play to that. You know, if they're a bit sweary, I tend to be a bit sweary. I'm not saying everybody should do this, but I'm not saying take an effing card. But what I'm saying is I'll just match their language a little bit more. And when I go up to a table of grandparents, I'll be different. I'll even maybe do different materials. So flexibility is so important. And the way to be flexible is to find some way of being yourself, of being how you would be. And I'm not saying you don't adapt, but you still use your own language. I meet a lot of magicians that as soon as they go in the trick, everything changes. And it's a bit like, wow, where did you go? you know. And for me, that is more important than, say, creating a story or something like that, unless you're doing it on stage, unless there's a reason for that. But so again, going back to the questions about creating a presentation for magic, can the magic speak for itself? Absolutely it can, as long as it's presented in an authentic, likable and professional way. So you get rid of all those verbal tics, you know, all that sort of, but that just comes with time, and people will forgive that as well, you know. And just be very mindful of what magic you're doing, how much time it takes. Is it appropriate for the situation? You know, really long drawn out stories do not work if people just want something quickly, and the other way around, if you are sitting at a table and you've got a bit of time, enjoy yourself. So there you go. Right, so there's the 2 questions. I hope that was helpful. It's only my opinion, based on a little bit of experience, I suppose, but differing opinions are, of course, very well respected by me. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but and if you do disagree, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Any questions before I go now? It's been quite long, 20 minutes. I will look through them. I think I've got to play these questions back live, but if I haven't read one of your questions, please put them in the comments afterwards. Not that I'm complaining, but why so many books coming out at the moment? Are there so many books coming out at the moment? I suppose Christmas has got to have a bit to do with it. You know, people that write books don't make much money, all right? So that's one thing. Now, I'm not saying that they're doing it just for the money, but writing a book takes a lot of work, a hell of a lot of work. I know people that are doing it and in the middle of it, and it's just very stressful. It takes a lot of work. So they're going to capitalize on a time when it's going to be more profitable, I suppose. So that'll have something to do with it. I suppose things get released. Again, now it feels like early days, but it's going to be the session in Blackpool around the corner, especially in the UK. So that's, people are going to want to get books out for that, and maybe a little bit before. But part of me thinks, you know, it's just people, I think there's a resurgence in books. I think people are starting to realise that there was a thing a couple of years ago, people going, a book's dead and is it all about PDFs? And actually, I think we're starting to realise now that we like a book. Using a book is great. David, I'm desperate to get it. I will get it, clearly. But if anybody's watching this that might know someone that works for someone who might send it to me to review, that'd be great. Steve Spill's sending me his book. I'm getting that, so I'm going to be reviewing that. So there's so many, isn't there? But they're brilliant, yeah. Okay, right. So there you go. 23-minute ramble, everybody. Thank you very much. Like I said before, if I've missed your question, put it on the comments afterwards, because I might miss these. Great show as always. Please, thanks, Will. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being there. If you still not signed up, go and sign up for Card Magic Calls, because it might one day pay for this channel and that camera I've just bought. Thanks, Alec. Thanks, David. Have a good one. Anything else? Yeah, like, subscribe, share it. You know, if you think this might be useful for some magicians, share it. If you've got a magic club to talk about it, a bit of word of mouth would be lovely. Hey, thanks, Anthony. Any questions at all? If you sign up, let me know. Have a good one, everybody. Here's the awkward bit where I go, where'd you turn it off? There you go. Cheers. Bye.